Hey guys, good afternoon. Officially welcome. Switch your cameras on. It's not compulsory, but obviously I like to see my students. Officially welcome a couple of different groups of people. First of all, second year IBA students, well done for coming into the second year. Second year BA students, welcome. And of course, we have a bunch of pre-master students, I think in total about 250 of them. Welcome as well. This is officially our first corporate finance lecture. You might not all know me, so maybe the briefest of introduction is in order. My name is Florian. I'm from the corporate finance department, of course. I teach all kinds of different subjects. Last year I taught macro in the first year bachelor. I obviously teach the second year corporate finance course. I supervise every year about, I don't know, something like 20 bachelor theses. In the Master Finance and Investment, I usually teach a brief refresher on philosophy of science. I supervise every year about 40 master theses in finance and investments. And I have a completely sort of different job within RSM. I teach a lot of executives. So not students like you, but executives, people that are already CEOs, CFOs of publicly listed firms. If they need a more specific training, they also come to us. So the reason why I want you to know this is I want that you understand I'm not teaching you stuff, and it's also true, by the way, for my colleague Celine. We're not teaching you stuff just because we need some sort of content. We select topics of which we are convinced that they are relevant for you later on. And I supervise all kinds of theses that are not finance as well. So I'm involved in the Executive Master Corporate Communication, so I also supervise communications theses. I'm a member of the program committee, so if you're enrolled later on in any of our masters, it's possible that you also have to work for me. I have also my colleague Celine here, who will teach the workshops. She will introduce herself in a bit. I thought I would like to first start by telling you a little bit how the course is going to work. Based on the fact that you are students, I try to prioritize my information based on what I think you think most important and less important. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Where is your grade going to come from? How is the exam going to be like? So there is going to be one final exam that will count for 100% of your grade. The exam itself is going to be an open book exam. That means you can use whatever material you want, which is a bit of a good news, bad news scenario, because obviously if you can use any material you want, the questions have to be a little bit more sophisticated, right? So it's not as simple as then just looking stuff up and copy-pasting it. The questions that you will get 20 multiple choice questions, all of which will revolve around application. So they will be calculations of some sort. We have overall, I think, something like 10, 11 chapters. So we're trying to have roughly two calculation questions, two calculation multiple choice questions for each chapter, so that you basically really have to look at every chapter at least a little bit. And there will be a part on the exam revolving around open questions. Normally students always want to know from me, how many questions will we get? I never really understand the question, because what does it matter for you? It's not going to change. If I say 1 versus 10, what will that change for you? So I don't really get it. In the past, we always had 2 open questions and each with 4 sub-questions. So you could say there are like 8 open questions, but I'm in the process of grading it right now, so I don't want to, settle on a number. I want to come up with cool questions, and if it's 5, it's 5, and if it's 8, it's 8. What we will make sure of is that the exam is doable in the time that you are given. So that is that exam. What else? Yeah, you will have 2 lectures per week with me. So our dates are on Tuesday and Thursday, 1 o'clock in this setting. So just so you know, and also for the viewers at home that follow the YouTube stream, we have a Zoom license for 300 users. So initially I thought I will ask every week 20 volunteers to be in a Zoom call with me, because I was worried that students might not otherwise show up. The fact that we are already at 300 tells me we don't need that at all. So I post usually about 15 minutes before we start our Zoom link, because we have to set everything up in the studio first. And then just first come, first serve. If you're in a Zoom call with me, you're my students, so it's like you're in a classroom with me. If you have questions, Don't be weird, don't be shy, just ask me. That's why we have Zoom, of course. If you, for whatever reason, prefer to follow the YouTube stream, it is live. As I understand, it has a delay of, I think, 30 seconds. That's not so dramatic that you cannot ask questions. So if you have questions and you're only watching on YouTube, now then ask your questions in the chat. I have my trusted sidekick, Ikamba, here. She's a pre-master student. She already helped me out last week big time. She's in the studio following the live stream, the live chat. So that means if you ask a question in the YouTube live chat, Ikamba will basically forward it to me to a certain degree. Don't forget, there are 1,500 normal students enrolled, plus about 400 resitters. So theoretically, I don't think that's really happening, but it's possible. If all these people at the same time follow the lecture, there are 1,900 people either in Zoom or on YouTube. So that means if everyone has only one question, we have 1,900 questions per session. So at some point I would have to, manage the questions. That's not a problem either. I still prefer that you ask. What I do anyway in our break and after class, I scroll through the chat myself, because there are many questions that I find very relevant, but you might have asked them a little bit too early, or they are a little bit too far away from the topic we are talking about right now, but I want to pick them up later. So either way, if you have a question, by all means, either ask me directly on Zoom or ask it in the YouTube live chat. If you are one of those students, like I was texting with, I think 2 nights ago, a student that texted me Friday night, I'm on the way to the beach in Ipanema, so in Brazil, studying YouTube. So obviously in a different time zone, you might also have questions. What then? If you then have questions, then that's why we use YouTube. Post it as a YouTube comment. I have, of course, a look on that as well. There are 2 things that I will do with this. It could be that it's a very easy question that I can address with 1 or 2 sentences. Then I will do this as a comment as well. If, however, your question is for whatever reason too big or too interesting, I will not answer it as a comment, then I will address it in the next lecture. In case you're worried, you don't want to be yourself on YouTube, that's perfectly fine. I see you in front of me on a huge monitor, but this is not so you will not be visible on YouTube at all. So no need to be worried or shy. 2 lectures with me per week. In the first lecture per week, I will do my best to explain, financial theory. In the second lecture per week, typically we will still have to do a little bit about the content of chapter of lecture 1. So whatever we have discussed, wrap that up. And the main idea of the second lecture is to basically try, as best as we can, to apply the theory that we have discussed in the first lecture to a real-life case, to a real-life setting, to a real-life company. It's not always with each chapter equally easy to do this, but I would like that basically you together with me, so that basically means you, agree on one specific real company. And you basically tell me which company that is, and this is the company that I will use to demonstrate our financial theory. So there are different ways we could do this. I could theoretically create on our Canvas a discussion forum, and you just type in whatever company you would be interested in, and I have a look what the majority wants. That's one way. I was also thinking of asking your student representatives to maybe send out a survey. All of that is fine for me. I would like that next week we have agreed on a company that I can prepare specific content. Just a couple of sort of inclusion criteria. It needs to be a publicly listed firm so that we have financial statements. I need balance sheet, income statement, cash flow statement. It's cool if it's publicly listed because a lot of what we do in corporate finance has to do with stock prices. So I need a stock price basically. And I do not want that it is a financial company, so not a bank or a near bank. And the reason is accounting for banks or finance for banks is very different from any other company. So that would be way too specific for what I have in mind. Is it roughly clear what I want of you? I want that you basically get together, survey, whatever means, and that you basically, at the latest, I would say this week Sunday midnight, I want to get an email essentially from your SR reps saying, hey Flo, this is the company that the majority of students wants as a sort of case company that we will use as our model, as our demonstration object throughout the course. Is it clear what I'm saying, guys? Nice. I just mentioned your student representatives. Let me say 1 or 2 words about that. So I'm a huge fan of SR. I'm actually a member of SR. I'm the CAS-Kommissie, so I sign off on the budget and the annual statements of our own student organization. So I'm longer a member of SR than your SR representatives. And the reason why I do this is obviously I'm a huge fan. I think if you have good student representatives, it's a huge help for me. It's a huge help for sort of normal students as well. I'm used to working extremely close with my SR reps, so we always have a WhatsApp group. I usually, when I need something, I call, I text, so that does not happen that we don't speak. I want that if something goes wrong, or not wrong, I want at any point in time to know how my students are feeling about the course, how it's going, what we can improve, what you guys want more of or less of. So we have the student representatives for IBA and BA. For IBA, it's again Helene. Helene did it already very, very well for macroeconomics last year. And the second new student representative for IBA is Charlotte. Not the Charlotte from last year, it's a different Charlotte. And for BA, it's Benham and it's Robin. So please make sure that you have their email addresses. I always want, before you talk to me, if you have whatever something, get in touch with your SR reps. I'm always in touch with them as well. This will improve our communication like crazy. I also want that you understand, both Celine as well as me are extremely demand-driven. What we do not do is we do not create content and say, well, fuck you, whatever students want, we don't care. I have prepared this, and this is what you have to eat. This is not how we do it. We have, of course, a certain amount of topics, of theories, of calculations that we need to go through. That's, of course, our job, and it's your job to deal with this. But there is a significant room for deviating from that. So if I know, just as a weird example, if I know a lot of you are interested in whatever, fraud, balance sheet manipulation, now then I can, of course, try to include a little bit more of that. I already know from last year, quite a few of you are interested in trading, so trading stocks, bonds. If I know that, we can include a little bit more of that. So don't be passive. Don't view yourself as somebody who simply consumes. You have a large impact on what we do, and you can utilize that, okay? Don't be shy. Talk to each other, get organized, talk to your SR reps, and we talk to them as well. I want that at any point in time, we're on the same page, and I don't want any nasty surprises on the exam. The same goes for questions. So I'm happy to answer your questions. As I've said many times, that's the only reason I get out of bed in the morning. But there needs to be a certain structure to this. So first of all, I don't like if students ask me questions simply because they are too lazy to look up something in the course manual. I'm not your secretary. I also don't like getting emails like I did yesterday. Hi, how do I buy a book? I'm also not your mom, okay? So if you don't know how to buy a book, I honestly don't know what to advise you then. I think then you have all kinds of other homework to do at this point. So I feel very responsible for content-related questions. If you want to chat about career advice, research topics, finance craziness, anything, but I feel very quickly insulted if you start treating me like a secretary, all right? That is not going to happen. What else is important? Of course, we have a book. Let me talk about that for a second. The book is the same book that you used officially in your first year finance course. It's the Hillier book called Corporate Finance, not surprisingly. Officially, we are using the 3rd edition. However, as I understand it, somewhere the 4th edition is available. I'm talking now about actual physical books, paper books. So officially, we did not want to screw our students over. We did not want that in the first year we say, please spend 60 euro on the finance book. And then 1 year later, for the next finance course, we say, oh, yeah, but that's the 3rd edition. This is now the 2nd year course. Please spend another 60 euro on the 4th edition. That's the only reason why we said, let's stick with the 3rd edition. So as far as I'm concerned, the 3rd edition will work, no problem. However, Celine, your workshop teacher, has created a magnificent practice structure within Connect. So you know this maybe from your first year a bit. Connect is the online environment of the publisher of our corporate finance book. So she has created for every chapter a ton of questions that you can work on. Calculations, multiple choice, intuition questions, anything that you want, you can infinitely practice there. In order to access this online environment, it's called Connect, you need a code to log in. Now, when you buy the book, there are two different packages. You can buy the book without the code, then you get a paper book. That's perfectly fine for studying, for reading. There are, of course, exercises in there, but you do not have automatic access to all the awesome tools on Connect. That requires a separate code. The second thing you can do is you can buy the book together with the code as a package. It's usually a relatively attractive price. That's what I would do. I'm not saying this is my advice. This is what I would do if I were a student. Just to clarify what I said in the course manual, Celine and me had a talk with the publisher of our book, so with McGraw-Hill, and they agreed if you have a code from last year which only gave you access to the third edition, we were able to persuade McGraw-Hill that you automatically get a free upgrade, that's what I'm describing in the course manual, to the online book, to the e-book of the fourth edition. So even if you have from last year the third edition and the code for the third edition, if you log into Connect now, everything is already fourth edition for no extra money. That is what I meant. I got a couple of emails about that. I had no real idea how to respond to that because I thought it's bizarre. The question was, well, I had no book last year. Does this mean I get now for free the fourth edition? No, of course not. If somebody says you get a free upgrade on the software of your iPhone and you don't have an iPhone, it does not mean you get an iPhone for free, of course. That's not an upgrade then, right? So either way, you need a book. Full disclosure, sometimes students ask me, can I pass the course without a book? The answer is yes, it's possible. I had one student, he was also my research assistant. He never had a book and he passed the course with, I think, a 9.8. And right afterwards, he was accepted into a master in Oxford. So if you are like that guy, yeah, I have seen it, it is possible. If you ask me, is it very likely that I will pass the course without a book? I would say absolutely not. So I would bet very large amounts of money, if you have no book, you will probably not pass. It can be done. I don't recommend it, all right? And please don't ask me stuff like, would you recommend buying the book? I mean, I collect books in my private life. I love books. I think people read not nearly enough. I think for people like you at the very beginning of their professional life, to be the proud owner of at least one decent finance book, I think that's advisable. If you do an internship, if you later on have your first job, you will constantly hear terms from finance where it makes sense to not look up stuff on Wikipedia and Investopedia and crap like this, but where you open a serious book. And last but not least, it's fully tax deductible. But again, it's your decision, right? I'm not micromanaging you. Like I said, I'm not your mom. If you feel, yeah, I can do a course without a book, by all means do it, okay? I don't recommend it. I think it will not work very well. What else? 2 lectures a week, Tuesday, Thursday with me, mostly revolving around theory. And on Friday, workshop with Celine. She will say a little bit more about it in a second. As you know, we have a Zoom call and we stream this live to YouTube. That means the moment the YouTube stream ends, there should be a video on our channel with basically the recording of the Zoom session. The fact is, we are usually our streams are around 2.5 hours long because there's a break and we usually start a couple of minutes late. So it's a very long video. And as you know, if you follow YouTube, we stream in full HD. So there's a lot of processing time. And we noticed during the refresher sessions last week that usually the video of the live stream takes overnight to be available. There seems to be a workaround I've discovered. If I add a video to the playlist on the channel, it is available immediately. However, so the point I want to drive home is, if you don't immediately see today at 3:05, oh, the lecture is not online, do not spam me with emails, please, right? I cannot influence this. This is just processing time that YouTube requires, the video is then available, like I said, typically on the next morning. So we are not losing that. Obviously, in my lectures, I use a lot of PowerPoints. If you have followed my macroeconomics course, you know a little bit what to expect. So everything that is very mathematical, I have color-coded very nicely so that my slides, especially the mathematics slides, are almost self-explanatory. So just because I don't show you every single slide during our lecture does not mean they are irrelevant or that there is no information on that available. I always will, after our class, make then the slides that I have used available on Canvas as well for you to obtain. What else is important? Shall we talk about workshops? All right, I hand over to my colleague Celine. Do you have the mic? Yes.
It's not on.
I can't hear you. I do it.
Hello?
Florian, can you take over for a second? Can you take over for a second?
We're figuring out how we can have a second microphone. Well, in the meantime, not to waste time, so far is everything clear? Did I miss something where you say, this is information that I already need?
Yes, there are some questions.
Excellent, ask.
Yes, can you purchase the code alone?
Yes, I think Celine will talk about this in a second. Celine was in touch with the publisher of the book to figure out exactly all of this. So it is possible to buy the book alone. You can also buy the code alone. I think Celine even was able to obtain a link, so to make it super easy for you. In a second, more on that. What else?
Is it possible to upload the slides before the live session so people can take notes within the slides?
Theoretically, that's possible. I'm kind of indifferent. I just want that you know a little bit the trade-off. If I give you slides, let's say 2 days before the lecture, I'm basically committed. I cannot do any changes anymore. And especially, I mean, you know, in less than 2 weeks, we have presidential elections in the United States. The markets already are going crazy now. So there are a lot of events happening that I would like to incorporate basically in real time. The moment I prepare all of this and publish it before, I'm locked in. So that's the trade-off. In principle, I don't mind at all. Yeah, I can do this. I think also Celine makes her workshop exercises available before. She will address in a second more. What else?
Could you tell us more about people doing the old curriculum exam?
Yes, thank you. Excellent question. I forgot that in my welcome speech. I'm terribly sorry for that. I said welcome second year IBAs and BAs and pre-masters. There are, of course, some resitters. And there's a bit of a special situation now. The curriculum has changed, as it sometimes does. So last year, corporate finance was a 10-week course covering more content, and not only more, but also different content. So in our I call it now corporate finance new, we have 2 chapters that before were not included, yet resitters had in total more chapters that you did not have. So how is that for these guys? It's a very good question. You get a different exam. No, let me start differently. So these students, I call them now the resitters that follow the old trajectory, also have a separate Canvas course. So there's nothing going to happen in these courses. I posted an announcement there. You should basically, if you want to follow this course, I would strongly, of course, advise it, then follow the new course, as all second-year students currently do. But be aware that you have a different exam in the end. Your exam will still have the same mode, so it's still going to be 20 multiple choice questions. You will get a little bit more open questions, and obviously the content that students that follow the new curriculum that they get, you will not have on your exam and vice versa. So we really have to create 4 different exams: IBA Corporate Finance New, IBA Corporate Finance Old, BA Corporate Finance New, BA Corporate Finance Old. The BA exams will be in Dutch, the IBA exams will be in English. Would you say, especially resitters now, is this addressed for you enough? Does it make sense? Do we have something in the chat about this?
No comment
Excellent. I would strongly, by the way...
Question for a Dutch exam,
Yeah?
if that's possible. For finance last year, because the subjects are quite language specific, can we get English translations of important words in the exam?
So my nationality officially is, as you have maybe guessed, is Austrian. I actually understand Dutch really well because my own research is in Dutch. However, you do not want me to translate anything. I think, Celine, you will have Dutch exams, right? Will you also prepare like a vocabulary sheet, something? Okay. Yeah, Niels. Celine just says from the back of the studio, yes, she will do something like this. However, that's Celine's answer. I also have an answer. I don't really agree with you, Niels. You said since finance is very language specific. I mean, it isn't. Finance is always English. I mean, nobody in the real world, not even a Dutch person, would say Eigenvermogen. It's always equity. So, and also the book is in English, right? So I think I would strongly encourage also Dutch students, so students that follow BA, to learn the English terminology, honestly. Because in the real world, it's much more common to talk about assets and equity rather than using the Dutch terminology. But there will be something, yes? Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome.
Guys, what else can I do already for you now? Questions? Will the old corporate finance chapters, I see this here from Maurits, will the old corporate finance chapters also be taught? Do the reciters have to learn on their own? No, the old chapters will not be taught anymore. The reason why you have this exam opportunity is because the curriculum is just expiring. So you already had basically 2 times the whole course. No, so there will be nothing on that. However, last year we have created an initiative. It's called Studisprint for students that are in year 4 and more in their bachelor studies, but have not graduated yet. So that are typically students that are struggling with one specific subject. And there are indeed a couple of students that are in their 4th year or even longer, that have everything done, even a bachelor thesis, but still have corporate finance open. If you are one of these students, I have something for you. Like I said, last year we've created Studisprint, which is basically an initiative to help students that clearly can graduate, but that have a selective weakness or deficit in only one subject, like in my case, corporate finance. What we have done is we've created a bit of a sort of module. First we want these students to get together, because everyone in their 4th year or higher thinks, oh, I'm alone, I'm the only one who does not manage. No, there are plenty of these students, so we want that these students work together, study together, help each other out. And secondly, I'm in touch with these students, so I will basically schedule extra sessions. I usually ask a couple of days before such a session, give me a Word document with your most pressing questions, and I prepare them really like a private tutoring session for these students. Now, based on the fact that we have a pandemic, the priorities within the university are completely different. So officially there is no Studisprint this year, and I said it's unacceptable. I think it was very successful last year. So I think 85% of these long-term students actually really graduated with great grades in corporate. So it is a successful model. I want to keep it. However, there is no official structure anymore. I still ask the student advisors, please send out an email to long-term students that have only corporate finance outstanding. I'm currently busy trying to get a separate Canvas course so we can easier communicate. For these students, then I will try to arrange extra sessions where we basically see exactly what are you struggling with, and I will come up with some explanations, exercises, practice material to fix this.
Another question.
Yeah.
As a Dutch pre-master student, can you also do the exam in English?
To be honest, I can. If you're a Dutch pre-master student, can you do the exam in English? My private opinion is I would be indifferent. I would, of course, do it in English myself, rather. I don't know. I think this is something you should ask program management. But however, please, guys, there are 250 pre-master students. Please don't individually send emails to program management, because that just causes a bottleneck. This is a perfect question for SR reps. I mean, especially with pre-masters, we have our WhatsApp group. let's agree on one pre-master student who is a little bit like our SR rep, and this person communicates with program management, one email, program management will explain, and the information is shared in our WhatsApp group. Let's keep it efficient. So long story short, I don't know, we have to ask program management. What else?
I have a question.
Ask.
For the workshops, do we need to prepare any exercises?
Well, my colleague Celine, the moment we have the audio. Do we have the audio? Awesome. Okay, Celine can take over. That's a Celine question. Guys.
Okay, hello. So my mic should be working now. Super happy that and let me get this ready. Yeah, that the course finally started and that I see all these faces on the screen. If you see me look up a bit, it's because that's where I see your faces, but I will do my best to look in the camera and then imagine your faces to it. So my name is Selina. The second year students will know me from the first year course, as I also did the workshops there. I want to give you, first of all, a huge compliment for how you coped with the whole COVID situation, having the lectures and the workshops until March and then do your exam much later on. The resit you all did really, really well. The passing rate was high, so like huge compliment, and that makes me feel confident that you're going to do super well in this course. Pre-master students, well, I look forward to getting to know you, work with you, and retakers, you probably know me from last year as well. So the workshops are going to be on Friday. The BA one from 10 to 12, so that's the Dutch version. If you're an IBA student who wants to join at 10, happy for you to do so. And the IBA one is going to be from 12 to 2. So that obviously is going to be in English. The setting is going to be the same like Florian his lecture, so I'll be here in the studio. You can either join via Zoom if you want, like have an active participation. Makes me very happy to see all your faces on the screen, so please do so. Or if you feel more like passive participation, or you like the HD quality in YouTube, then of course join via YouTube or watch it back at a later moment. So the workshops will always, as the second year students know, I always like to start with a warm-up quiz. As it's a workshop, I really like you to work because I believe that that's the best preparation you can get for your exam. So I'll always start with that, and then I'll take you through 3 to 4 connect exercises of increasing difficulty, of which 2 are quite difficult. And Florian told me this nice saying last week, that sweat saves blood. So I'll try to make you sweat as much as possible during the workshop to save a lot of blood during the exam. For those exercises, I will usually post them on Monday, so the Monday before the Friday. For this week, it will be today. So I'll post them on Canvas, and I recommend you to prepare for them. Because as I said, 2 will be quite difficult, so it will be much more easy to follow me during the workshop if you have prepared for them. As you will get to know me better, you will find out that I'm a pretty structured person. So I like to have a structure of when we will cover what exactly. So we have these 7 weeks, which every week a certain topic on the menu, until our exam, the 23rd of December. And note that there are some chapters which I won't discuss in the workshop, as they are very qualitative in nature. So you can just go through them yourselves. Then going to connect. So after this lecture, I will post the link to register for Connect. You can all just register via that link. I will also upload another doc from McGraw-Hill with simple steps how you do this registration process. So you can do 2 things. Either you use the codes that you purchased with the book, so that you use for your first year, or you only buy the code to give you the online access. So then you will have online access to the 4th edition book, and you can do all the online exercises. So yeah, that's also a good option, I think. And sometimes in previous years, students said, okay, we form a group together with 2 or 3 students, and we just use one code together because we always study together. So then, of course, only one can log in. But if you are in a Zoom meeting together with each other, that's also an option. Yes? So the content in Connect contains, first of all, Smartbook. This is a really cool new thing in Connect. Because you have the book, you first read the chapters, and then you get questions, and based on your answer, if it's wrong, it refers you to the right page in the online book, and you can read it again to understand why your answer is wrong. Also, it adapts. If you give a lot of good answers to a certain topic, it goes quicker to the next topic. So it's like adaptive learning. And the other really cool feature to it is that it connects to a Read Anywhere app. So you can just download that on your mobile phone and do these exercises whenever, wherever you are on your mobile phone. So that's really nice. And the goal of this is that you understand concepts. Yeah? Then the second part are static exercises. And these are really the core for your calculations. So your calculations on the multiple choice, they will be like pretty similar to that, except for that these are open, but it's similar in setup. So these are also the exercises I will cover during the workshops. It's important that you really go through them all and that you understand all of them. And then in addition, there's the algorithmic exercises, also such a difficult word. Those are the static exercises, but then with a number tweaked. So the number iterates so that you can practice the same exercise over and over again, just with different numbers. So that's not mandatory to do. That just depends on if you want to have some extra exercise before the exam, you can go there. So finally, if you see the screen, this is how it looks. So here you have chapter 12, and you see then first chapter 12 concepts. So this is the smart book I told you about, what you can also do on your phone. Then there's the static exercises. Those you cannot do on your phone, unfortunately. And then the algorithmic exercises if you want to get that extra practice. Don't freak out if certain chapters, like chapter 13, only have the concepts. That's because it's a very qualitative chapter. So there's no calculation questions to it. Are there any questions so far for the workshops?
They will all be recorded, right?
Yes, everything will be recorded. So same way, it's like YouTube live streamed and it will be recorded. Thank you.
Yes, I have one question where Mandalina asked, what exercises apart from the ones in the workshop should we do for additional practice?
So first, always start with the static exercises. And if you then want extra practice, then you go to the algorithmic exercises. The focus is the static exercises.
And can you buy the code separate?
Yes, you can buy the code separate. It's €49.
Do you have the link for that?
Yeah,
Hey,
it's.
I also have a question.
Yes, please.
You said we have to prepare for the workshop. Does it mean already making the actual exercise or having a look at it?
Yeah, well, it depends on how good you are. But I would say try to make it. And then wherever you get stuck, well, try to see if you can solve it yourself. Or just then you know where you have to pay extra attention during the workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bibi.
I have a question as well.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so if we're making all the exercises on Connect, is it like useful to also make the exercises in the book, or is that kind of like redundant?
Yeah, that will be redundant. So the exercises in Connect overlap with the exercises in the book.
Okay.
So I would just focus on the Connect ones. But if you prefer like hard copy, but yeah, in Connect you have the answers right to it. So yeah, focus on that. Thanks, Sophie. Any further questions in the chat?
I have a question actually.
Okay, yes, please, Victor.
Can you provide an overview of what questions you're going to cover before each workshop so we kind of have an idea of what to expect during the workshops?
Yes, so those I will always post on Monday. So I will just copy the question in and then you see which 3 to 4 I cover. Not the warm-up, because that's really on the spot to warm you up, but the 3 to 4 big ones I will always post it on Monday. Thanks, Victor.
Thank you.
All right.
Any further? It's okay. Okay, thanks. We'll look forward to seeing you on Friday.
All right, guys, I'm back. Obviously, before the break, there's no sense in starting with content. That's always unfortunate in the first lecture. But I want to say a couple of small things, how I think you can optimize your performance. So 12 years. I'm teaching at universities for 12 years. I'm tracking how students that are very successful in their study program, how they prepare. So concretely, after an exam, I send typically an email to all students that have scored a 9 or higher and ask them, can you please type up for me just a completely freestyled Word document? How did you prepare? So basically answer my question, how were you able to perform that well on the exam? How were you able to score a grade of 9 or higher? And what I do is, I get this, some of these descriptions are then brief, some of them are very elaborate, multi-pagers, and I usually copy them together in one big Word document, and I put it on my Canvas course for other students to see. So, and it's every year the same. So I will do this year again. I just want to, on the record, say exactly what I think you should be doing if you want to maximize your performance. What students that score a 9 or higher have in common is they always attend classes. So of course you can study by yourself, there's no question about it. Typically it goes less well than if you follow classes. That's of course what Celine and me are doing. We are trying to make sure that everyone understands the core mechanics of what we are discussing. So come to class, go to the workshops. Students that score a 9 or higher usually say, I practice, forgive me for saying that, I practice my ass off on Connect. So you, like Celine said, sweat saves blood. The more you sweat in training, the less you will bleed in battle. That's just how that is. So think from the perspective of a teacher, how many different questions could somebody possibly ask you about CAPM? So if you practice 20 CAPM exercises, how likely will you be able to be surprised on the exam? Not, basically. All right. And work together. I know right now it's very easy to feel I'm completely alone, I'm in a different country, whatever. Work with each other, set up online study groups, support each other, explain stuff to each other. Don't do this on your own. Of course you can do it on your own, but I mean a university should not only be about my own performance and my own CV and crap like this. I think I would not want to study finance myself. I would like to do this with 2 or 3 other students, roughly on my level, not a lot better, not a lot worse, and we do this together. It's just a much nicer experience. And the last thing, this is one of the most important things for me. So when I teach, and I think, please Celine, correct me if that's different for you, I think she's very similar, we care a lot about big picture stuff. So when you look at our finance book, it's of course a big book. If you open it at a random page, it's super easy to get completely overwhelmed by all the details, of course. And I see this every year, not just with students, but also with executives in the real world. It's very easy to get lost in details and then completely lose sight of why we are talking even about this one detail. So whenever you have the feeling, I'm not really sure anymore what's going on, go back a little bit, zoom out a little bit, and ask yourself, what is the big picture? So what I do, that's just my personal preference, when I talk about finance, it helps me a lot to whatever I'm discussing attached to a balance sheet and an income statement. So I think about a company as it's represented by a balance sheet, by an income statement, by a cash flow statement, and whatever I'm working on in the topic of corporate finance must somehow connect to the balance sheet or income statement or cash flow statement. So make sure to frequently zoom out and ask yourself, do I even know why I'm calculating this exactly? All right? Don't get lost in the detail. And when you get lost in the details, go back to the last point where you still understood the big picture and take it from there. And like I said before several times, make sure you stay in touch with me and with Celine. Either personally, in Zoom, via YouTube chat, via YouTube comments. You have my phone number, of course. So I don't mind at all getting the occasional WhatsApp, just checking in briefly. That's perfectly fine. If there are problems, I want to know that immediately. And the last thing before the break is this. It is very tempting, I think, to say, everything is recorded anyway. Might as well take now a couple of weeks off, and then 1 week before the exam, I will really sit down and study. Sure, it's a I suppose that's a valid strategy, but it is a strategy I would describe as risk-seeking. Let me do a very rough calculation for you. You have 2 lectures per week, 1 workshop per week, over 7 weeks. So that means you have 6 hours of lectures per week times 7 weeks. So that are just consuming, I'm not talking about studying, just consuming the lectures and workshops are 42 hours. I mean, that's more than all the Marvel movies together. So if you wait till the last week, first of all, you will find yourself watching a lot of videos. And I mean, it's like eating a lot. Eating is not the same as digesting, and it's certainly not the same as practicing. So I would strongly recommend that you try to keep up, right? Of course, you don't have to follow live. You can do this later in the evening, on the weekend. That's all perfectly fine. But make sure you consume it in each week. Also, don't forget, finance builds up. So it's not like every week we start with a different topic where you can hop in. If you have not done anything for let's say 4 weeks, and then you follow a lecture, it's like you've never seen Game of Thrones, and then you watch episode 9 from season 5. I mean, don't be surprised if you have no idea what's going on. It is building up, all right? So for that reason, I would encourage you to basically stay on track. It's clear what I'm saying, guys? Any questions at this point? Anything that neither Celine nor me have addressed, yet you need right now? We've talked about the book, about the Connect code, about the lecture structure, how you can ask questions, that you are perfectly not only able, but invited to contribute, giving us topics, ideas for what you want to hear more about. I told you, if you're struggling with something, one more thing. Very often students send me a WhatsApp. Hey man, can you please explain this? I'm struggling. And for some reason, every student thinks I'm so special. My question is so special. And of course you are special, but very often your questions are just typical questions of somebody who is studying this for the first time. So I would always prefer it if you were to ask your questions in a setting like this, because otherwise I explain it to you on Friday night via WhatsApp, and there are 500 other students that have exactly the same question and that for whatever reason just don't want to ask, okay? So I always would like, when I answer your specific question, I would always prefer to answer it in a lecture or in a public comment that everyone can see this, okay? So don't be shy, don't be self-serving, don't be, basically, sorry for saying it, don't be an egoistic dick. Think about it, I have a question, probably other people have the same question, then just be brave. You know, Celine and me are teachers because we love teaching. We are not going to make fun of you for asking anything, or not at all. We are happy if you provide interesting questions for us to explain and for other students to consume this explanation as well. All right? Guys, I see just now a question pop up. Does anybody know for the resitters which chapters were on the agenda for the old curriculum? I know that, of course. Look at your old course manual. Just have a look at your old course manual, and there you have it.
Last question.
Yes?
Is there a bonus system?
No, there's no bonus system. No. Sorry. Well, not sorry, no. Why should there be a bonus system? There's a normal exam. It's a fair exam. Maybe a last word about the exam. I think I'll speak again for Celine as well. Please, again, interrupt if I'm not. I think we think very similarly about an exam. An exam should not be a torture session. It should not be basically some attempt to screw over students as badly as we can, to give misleading information and try to... No, that's not the idea. The idea is we want that students that study get good grades, students that do a little bit get okay grades, and students that have no idea what's going on should fail. So logically, we are always aiming for an exam that roughly consists of 25% relatively easy questions, maybe not what you find easy, what we think is objectively easy, 50% questions that are, normal, medium difficulty, and 25% of the questions challenging. I do not want that very good students get exactly the same grades as average students. I want that very good students have the opportunity to show off their exceptional skills. I want poor students that have not prepared well, I want them to fail. So that's how the exam is going to be like. But first and foremost, and that's the main message that I want you that I want you to remember, the exam will be fair. There will not be any weird trick questions. It's going to be a fair exam. Yeah. Guys, I suggest we have a 10-minute break and then we do actual content. All right? Yes? Super, guys. I see you in 10 minutes. Hey guys, welcome back. Let's do it. Cameras on, cell phones down, Meryl. I see everything. Yeah, exactly. Guys, let's do it. I'm sorry that it's always first lecture of a course is a lot of just first what I always find boring, blah, blah. I know it's relevant, of course, but I always feel it's a bit of I want to talk content. So I have reopened the overview that Celine created. As she said, she's extremely structured. I'm extremely unstructured, so I piggyback on her work here. Have a look at this. So we are now, of course, in week 1. As you see on our agenda officially is cost of capital with a couple of sort of sub-chapters, if you will. So risk and return with the CAPM, and of course, very important within the CAPM is beta. And all of this will build up to the WACC. In case you're wondering, why does it say WS1? Obviously, Celine has created that for the workshops, but we need to be coordinated. It cannot be that I teach you completely different chapters than the ones that you are supposed to discuss in the workshops. So we agreed that we will be very coordinated here. So I stick to that structure as well. So just that you know what essentially to expect. On the agenda for today, I would like to, even though we started this already or talked a little bit last week in the recap about it, Chapter 12 is officially on our agenda because it is that important. It was on your exam, on your curriculum in the first year course, and because it is that important, it is again on your curriculum, okay? So there will be nothing new, it will just be a recap. Today we will do CAPM, pay a little bit extra attention to CAPM beta, and then take this to the next level, WACC, and tomorrow we will do a brief recap, very likely on portfolio theory, simply because portfolio theory is a topic that is so omnipresent in finance, all right? And like I said, for next week, in the first lecture, we have our theories. And like I said, Sunday midnight, I would very much like to have from you a company, publicly listed firm, that we can use as our model. Enough of that, let's dive in. As I've told you, I have prepared, as always, a beautiful slide set. I make it available. Also for the record, I do not create slide sets that I show you and before I upload, change them. The only change I would do is if I were to discover a typo or something like this. So what I will never do is delete a couple of crucial slides just to give students some sort of fake incentive to actually come to class. What you see is what you get, okay? So no worries about that. Let's talk about the CAPM. Before we dive in, I want to agree with you on the big picture. This is the big picture. Have a look. I told you my own mind works like this, that when I think about a company, I think about the company in terms of its financial statements. The company is represented by a balance sheet, by an income statement, and by a cash flow statement. So I have on the left side all the assets, on the right side the liabilities and owner's equity. That here are all the assets that the company has, so all the stuff that belongs to the firm. And on this side, on the right side of the balance sheet, also called the capital side, I see how all of these assets were financed. Either it was all the assets were financed using debt, so liabilities, money that the company has borrowed, so that would be liabilities. In finance, we usually call this debt. Or it's equity. Equity is money that belongs to the company itself. And as we have established, both sides of the balance sheets have to be equal. Because everything I own, I somehow had to pay for. So that equation always has to hold. All right. So I said the first topic I want to discuss with you is the capital asset pricing model, the CAPM. Where does this fit now into the big picture? You need to follow with me along now. It's a relatively long train of thought, but try to keep up. The moment you lose track, you can of course interrupt me and ask, right? Let's do this. So in finance, we have one objective. What do you think? I mean, imagine at some point you might become the manager of a company. What do you think your overall goal, your overall objective should be? So, or asked in a simpler way, you are managing a firm. What should you do? What's a goal? Any ideas? Don't be shy, guys.
Make returns.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I heard already increase profits. Lara.
Value.
Wait a second. Lara wanted to say something. Lara, please.
Increase the profit for shareholders within the company.
Increase the profit for shareholders. Yeah, different opinions. Yeah, I kind of like it. It all goes in the right direction. Increase value. Be a bit more specific. Which value and for whom?
Raising capital to fund the company's investments.
Raise capital to fund the investments. All of this goes in the right direction. I would... Ooh, my cigarettes.
Shareholder value.
Willem, shareholder value what? Give me a full sentence.
Maximize shareholder value.
Very nice, Willem. I like it. So I would say the point of a manager, what a manager should be doing is maximize the value of the whole firm. Maximize firm value of the firm. All right. I agree with what Willem said. A publicly listed firm owes loyalty most to the shareholders. So when we talk about maximizing any kind of value, in the world of corporate finance, certainly true for a publicly listed firm, we're talking really about maximizing shareholder value. But this is not something you can actually do. If somebody says, please run my company in such a way that you maximize shareholder value, I mean, what does this even mean? In what to-dos does this translate? And I want to show you. It's not complicated. So if you want to maximize firm value, you want this to go up as much as possible. How can you do this? There are two things. So the question of how to maximize firm value breaks down into two sub-questions. Number one, which assets should I buy? Or should our firm buy? Should the firm buy? Focusing and unfocusing.
It's blurring, yes.
Is there something we can do about it?
It's better now.
Yeah, now it's better.
All right, we will see. We're still working on the setup. As I've said before, we improve it from each session to the next, but of course, neither of us is a professional YouTuber yet. We're getting there. Guys, question number one, how can a firm maximize firm value? This breaks down into two sub-questions. Well, I can maximize firm value by being very selective which assets I buy. So which assets should I buy? I should buy assets which will increase the firm value. And we have discussed this already. You know this from your first year course. Which assets should a company buy? What methodology can we use to figure that out? We would calculate the net present value of a specific asset or of a specific group of assets. So that means a company that says, well, we are thinking of opening a new shop somewhere else, answers the question, should we do this? Should we open this new shop or not? By engaging in a net present value calculation. In the recap last week, in the finance recap last week, it's of course on the channel, we discussed this. So how does it work? Well, typically a project works like this. A company says we want to open a new shop. That requires that the company spends some money. They need to purchase the building of the shop, for example. So we would have then a cash outflow minus cash flow. This is cash flow zero. It simply means it's a cash flow that occurs at T0. T0 is right now in time. So this here simply means the net present value of an asset or a group of assets, so a project, equals however much you have to pay for that right now, minus, because you pay it, plus, well, if you engage in a project, you do this because you hope that later on, this project will give you certain cash inflows. So you then say, once I have opened my new shop, I have bought the building, whatever, the office equipment and so on, in the next year, in year 1, I will earn a certain cash flow at T1, 1 year later. But, as we've discussed in the finance refresher last week, it's a cash flow that will occur next year, 1 year later. So I cannot simply sum this up, because then I would be neglecting the time value of money. If you don't know anymore how that works, please rewatch the finance refresher. Time value of money. So this is a future value here. In order to sum this up, I need to discount it by 1 period. This is next year at T1. So I need to discount with 1 plus discount rate, so 1 plus R, to the power of time. This will happen at year 1, therefore to the power of 1. And then I estimate further. In year 2, I will earn a certain cash flow 2, divided by, again, I have to discount it now by 1, 2 periods. I want all my cash flows, so this is a timeline. I want all my cash flows to be converted back into present value. So what's the value of all these cash flows right now in time? So this year I need to discount by 2 periods. 1 plus R, so 1 plus the discount rate, to the power of 2, and so on. And the last item would be cash flow in year n divided by 1 plus discount rate R to the power of n. All right, so then I discount this cash flow by n periods. So what does the company then do? They simply calculate this. Their result might be whatever. The net present value of our new shop equals, I'm just making stuff up, 100,000 euro plus. What does this mean in a full sentence? By engaging in this project will generate value of 100,000. That's what it means. Would we do this then, yes or no? Yeah. The decision rule, you remember that hopefully from last year, the decision rule when you work with net present values is, if a project has a positive net present value, you will engage in that project because it creates value. If the net present value of a project is negative, you will not engage in it because it destroys value. So, this is the first part of how you maximize firm value. But of course, there are problems now. Last week, when we discussed this a little bit, very quickly one of you said, yeah, but wait a second, where does the discount rate come from? Because in the example that I showed you last week, I simply made stuff up and I said, let's say the discount rate is 5%. But why 5%? Why not 10%? So this is still a question that we need to answer, okay? So the calculation I showed you here, at this point, you can actually not answer properly because at least one ingredient is missing. And the ingredient is you need to know what discount rate should we use. I will come back to it in a second. I'm still talking big picture stuff. The big picture stuff is what can a company do or the manager of a company to maximize firm value? Firstly, only engage in projects that have a positive net present value, meaning these projects increase firm value. What is the second thing? This is now an exercise in logic because on the left side we find all the assets that belong to a company, which will hopefully generate revenue in the future. And on the right side of the balance sheet, we find how all these assets were financed. So what else can a company do to maximize its value? Well, minimizing the cost of financing. So I said before, if the question is, what can I do as a manager to maximize firm value? I have two answers. Answer number one, select projects that maximize firm value. When does a project maximize firm value? Or increase firm value, I should say, if it has a positive net present value. What is the second thing you as a manager or a firm can do to increase the value of the firm? Minimizing the costs of financing. I give you a super simple example just so you understand basically the logic of that. Forget for a minute now about equity. Let's just talk about liabilities, so debt. I mean, it's logical if I say I want to purchase a new asset here and I want to finance it with a bank loan. Obviously, it's better for the value of the firm if the interest rate on the bank loan is, let's say, 2% rather than 25%. Clearly, a loan on which I pay 2% interest expenses, this is a lot cheaper than a loan on which I have to pay 25% interest expenses. Is everyone still on board? Does this still make sense, guys? Everyone on board?
Yes.
Super nice, guys. We're almost there. This works well. I like it. Okay, so we need to now talk about what is this thing that I call cost of financing. In my example with a bank loan, it's of course super easy. What's your cost of financing if you got a bank loan for your house, a mortgage, with an interest rate of 2%? Now, yeah, then the interest rate is 2%. But clearly, on the right side, we don't just have bank loans, we also have, of course, equity, right? So clearly, the cost of financing of the firm, or let me use already the official term, this is not called cost of financing. This is officially referred to as the cost of capital. And the reason why it's called cost of capital is the whole right side of the balance sheet is referred to as the capital side. So long story short, what are we actually going to do next? We are diving into the CAPM, but why do we do this? The big picture is this. I want to show you where we get a discount rate from, all right? This is what I meant in the introduction with don't get lost in the details. Don't immediately freak out thinking, oh my God, this is complicated math, and you forget completely why we are doing this. We are still doing several things. We're trying to set up a net present value calculation. Maybe, hopefully, we are able to forecast the cash flows of our project relatively accurately. All right, but we still need to figure out where is the cost, where is the discount rate coming from? And the first logical step to answer this would be to look at the right side of the balance sheet. We are trying now to figure out the cost of capital. All right, so let me elaborate a little bit on this. So I gave you a simple example. Imagine there is a bank loan here with an interest rate of 2%. And we know we have, 50% debt, 50% equity. What is then the total cost of capital? Well, you could say 50% times the cost of debt. By the way, brief sidebar. A very common misunderstanding that's very easy to fix, or where it's very easy to make sure that it never becomes a problem, is this. Sometimes students confuse this. Sometimes students see here, wait a second, that's a percentage, 50%, and that's a percentage, 2%. What's the difference? The difference is this. The 50% I wrote down here and the 50% here are what we call weights. That means this percentage tells us how much in our capital structure is debt and how much in our capital structure is equity. So my graphic does not represent that. If it's 50-50, the blocks should of course be equally big, but that's what it means. Whereas this percentage here is of course an interest rate, all right? So if you are taking notes, and I see many of you are, I love this, make a note. Don't confuse the percentage of a weight with the percentage of an interest rate, okay? Is it clear what I'm saying, guys?
Yes.
Super, all right. So a simple approach would be, I need to say now, what is our cost of capital in total? So a simple approach could be to say, well, we have 50% debt, that costs 2%, and we have 50% equity. Equity also has a certain cost. I call it, like we really call it in finance, we call it RE. So R is always some sort of interest rate or discount rate, and the index E is just short for equity. So what would be then the total cost of equity in my example here? I would say the total cost of capital, cost of capital in my example would be however much debt I have, multiplied with however much I pay for that, plus however much equity I have, multiplied with however much the cost of equity is. So in my example, the cost of capital would be 50% multiplied with the cost of debt, the 2%, plus 50% multiplied with, I have no number here, so I simply call it for the time being RE, the cost of equity. What can I point out here? Again, these, the 50% here and the 50% here are the weights. Do not confuse weights with an interest rate. If on the exam you confuse a weight with an interest rate, you will have a meeting with me in an unhappy mood. Okay? Make a note, weights are not interest rates. They just are both listed in percentages, but that's not that should not be confusing. My body fat content is also measured in percentage, right? So that should not throw us off our game. So far, so clear, guys. Super nice. Okay? Yeah?
Do you maybe have some examples of cost of equity? What things can it be?
Yes. So yeah, of course. So do I have some examples of the cost of equity, what it could be? The answer is yes. And this, you will see more examples in the next 3-4 weeks than you actually want to see. All right? Give it a little bit more time. I have elaborate slide sets. Celine has created a ton of very specific exercises. We are getting there, of course. Okay? So, yeah, of course.
You mentioned that the right side of the balance sheet is called the capital side, but I thought it was like the liability side. Is it just a different way of formulating, or?
No. If you call it the liability side, Rins, you are neglecting something. You are right. On the right side of the balance sheet, we do have liabilities, right? This here. But the right side is not just liabilities, it's also equity. So if you just call it liability side, you make it sound like it's a firm that has no equity whatsoever. All right? So I would say on the right side of the balance sheet, we see all capital. What kind of capital can a firm have? Well, either it's something borrowed, so some sort of liability. In finance, we would more likely call it debt. Or it's money that belongs to the company. Then we call it equity. All right? Also, just so you know this, the mix, the proportion of debt to equity, so in my example it's 50-50, but it can be anything. It could be 0-100, it could be anything in between. The mix of debt to equity of a company is referred to as capital structure. So I told you last week my own research field is capital structure theory. So this I can now explain a little bit better what it actually is that I'm researching. I'm trying to figure out in my research what is the best mix of debt to equity. What is the best capital structure? And best in finance means most value creating. That's what it means. All right? But we're still, again, let's not forget the big picture. Let's not lose sight of the big picture. The big picture is we are trying to figure out a total cost of capital. I was expecting one of you, at least one of you, to interrupt and basically saying, hey dude, why are you talking about that? Didn't you say you are about to explain to us where a discount rate comes from? So why am I actually talking about the cost of capital? I would like to show you 1 or 2 slides I have about this. This is a very important logical step. It is not complicated. Have a look at this. Where is it? Give me a second. We are trying to figure out an appropriate discount rate. Have a look at this. So, there we go. Have a look at this. I walk you through it. No need to read the slides. Like I said, you get them exactly like they are. You have to ask yourself, what can a firm actually do if they have generated a profit? So, or simpler put, what should a company do that has earned a profit? if you think about it in very simple terms, the company can say, we have made a profit, let's pay out the profit to the shareholders. So that is then referred to as dividends. If you're the proud owner of 50% of the shares of Apple, it means you're entitled to receive 50% of the profits that Apple makes in one specific year. So that's option one for the company. Pay everything out as a dividend. Option number two, Apple could also say, no, let's not pay it out. Let's keep the money in the company and reinvest it. Let's use it for opening a new shop, developing a new product. So with the idea of, let's keep the money in the company so that later on our profits will be even more. All right? So what are then the logical consequences of this? Think about the setup now as if you were a shareholder yourself. I'm a company, I have a profit, and I say, hey guys, I have a profit. What would you, my shareholders, want me to do with it? And I will say, yeah, well, it's your call, really. Either I pay it out to you as a dividend, or it stays in the company. Have a look now at my second bullet point. The second bullet point, maybe make a brief exclamation mark or something here. That's the key logic. If a shareholder is able to reinvest the dividend in any kind of asset, let's say a financial asset, like another stock, some sort of savings account, some sort of other investment, with the same risk as the project, well, you would prefer then the alternative with the highest expected return. Does that make sense? Well, if I give you money and I say you can invest it either here or here, the return, the risk of both projects is exactly the same. Which one do you prefer? You would say, dude, what kind of stupid question is that? If they are equally risky, I will pick the one with a higher return. Does this make sense, guys? Okay. What is then the logical consequence? Equally important third bullet point. A company should only undertake a new project if the expected return of this project they are considering is larger than the expected return of a financial asset with a comparable risk. And always go through the counterfactual. Why is that the case? If the return of the company's own project does not have a higher expected return, the shareholders would prefer to receive the dividend and invest it themselves. Does this make sense, guys? Okay. And the last bullet point is our conclusion from all of this. I see a question in the chat from Oktay. What is a financial asset? It's a good point. By the way, I'm usually trying in my lectures to strip away, the specific terminology, the specific language we use in finance as much as I can. Of course, we need that as well later on. If I use an expression that you have never heard or where you are not sure about, always immediately interrupt me, okay? There's nothing worse than talking to people that use big words and don't understand what they mean. So absolute good call of Oktay to basically point it out. What's a financial asset? A financial asset is any kind of investment that you as an investor can purchase with the idea of earning a return. So it could be the stock of some company. It could be a bond of a company. It could be a bond of of a country. It could be an even crazier instrument like an option, a future, a forward, something like this. So it's basically any kind of investment that you as an investor can purchase. Okay?
A lottery ticket quantified as such?
I think, yeah. I think, yes. I mean, a lottery ticket, you can calculate an expected return, right? I can accurately calculate the probability of a profit. By the way, in case some of you get now ideas because of Niels's input, oh, wait a second, lottery ticket is a cool asset. Well, the probability of winning the lottery once is less than being struck by lightning twice in your life. So as long as I do not see you, basically whenever there is a cloud on the sky hiding in the basement, I think it would be illogical of you to buy a lottery ticket because it's inconsistent. All right? But I suppose you could say this. However, on a finance exam, I would prefer it very strongly if you don't think about lottery tickets in terms of, oh, that's also an alternative investment. All right? But the core logic is this. This is my fourth bullet point here. the implication is the discount rate of a project, that the discount rate that the company uses, should be the expected return on a financial asset that has a comparable risk to that project. All right? That is the core logic. So whenever you think about CAPM, I strongly recommend, here the slide number, by the way, in case you cannot read this, is 63. Think about this, discuss this, explain it to each other. That is the core intuition. So why am I showing you this? Why am I talking about this? I'm still trying to make sure we all agree on the big picture. On the left side of the balance sheet, we ask ourselves, in which assets should we invest? Every finance textbook will say, yeah, fine, let's set up a net present value calculation. So, step one, we forecast the cash flows that this project that we're considering right now probably will give us, but that are all values that happen in the future, future values. So I need to discount them all, otherwise I cannot calculate my net present value. In order to do discounting, I need a discount rate. And based on the slide that I have just shown you, the discount rate should get a little bit clearer now. What should it be? We should discount with what we call a risk-appropriate discount rate. Every firm has a very different firm risk from any other firm. So we need, in our discount rate, we need to incorporate the firm-specific risk of all of this here. Okay?
A question.
Yeah?
A question.
Ask.
Justin asked, are the cost of capital and thus the cost of debt similar to their betas?
It's a cool question, Justin. So the question was, is the cost of capital, is the cost of equity, is that similar to beta? I would not say it like this. I would not say they are similar because they are in completely different units. It's a bit like you ask me, is your body weight a bit similar to your size? No, my body weight is expressed in kilogram and my size, or small size, is expressed in centimeters. So I would never say kilogram are kind of similar. However, Justin is not completely wrong, of course. Beta is one of the most important input parameters in order to figure out the cost of equity. So, Justin, give me 2 minutes and this will be much clearer. Going back to this, we are trying to figure out our discount rate. A starting point would be to say, okay, how much liabilities, how much debt do I have, multiplied with the cost of debt? How much equity do I have, multiplied with the cost of equity? But then, of course, not only Justin, but probably all of us say, all right, I understand where a cost of debt is coming from. I mean, I just looked this up on the loan contract. It's that simple. You pay for your mortgage 2%, whoop, 2%. But where? I mean, even in my calculation, I have no number here. I use a variable, I call it RE. So I think we need to now address the question, where is the cost of equity coming from? Because logically, what I want to do is, in step one, calculate the net present value. Before I can fill in any numbers, I immediately realize, oh shit, I don't know the discount rate. Then I say, okay, no problem, I got you, I fix it. I just figure out what's the cost of capital of the whole firm. How much debt, how much equity, cost of debt. And I immediately run into the next roadblock. Where is now my cost of equity coming from? So this would be my logical step two. And you see, I already fail again. So actually what I have to do is something else. I need to, in a first step, before I can calculate a net present value, I need to calculate a discount rate. But before I can calculate a discount rate, I need to figure out a cost of equity. So far, so clear. Is everyone on board? Very cool. This is the big picture I want to drive home. And if you then say, okay, dude, so tell us now, where is the cost of equity coming from? Can you tell me? How do I figure it out? Yes, I see it, boom, boom, boom. Super, guys, in the chat, CAPM, CAPM, CAPM. That's exactly it, guys. That's what the CAPM is for, all right? So, I'm a bit distracted because of all the people popping up on the cameras now. Let's go back to the CAPM and simply go through this very quickly. This is the CAPM. Have a look. Or let me do it on the whiteboard. It's maybe nicer. Let's look at the CAPM. Let I write it down. I explain in a second. We have. Wait, I want to do it like in your book. F plus beta multiplied with Rm minus Rf. So whenever somebody talks to you about CAPM, so the capital asset pricing model, they talk about an equation. In finance, anything called blah, blah, blah model is an equation. This is the equation. This is the CAPM, nothing else. So this here is R with the index J. I should be more accurate. What does it mean? It means from the perspective of the investor. Okay, I'm just talking now about investor logic. From the perspective of an investor, this here, Rj, would be the required return on firm J. So the index J here would be in the real world Apple, Netflix, Microsoft. It would be a specific company name. In my example here, it's abstract, but it's still a specific company. This here is about company J. So what does the CAPM tell us? This is now tricky. Pay attention. The CAPM can give us two different things depending on who is using it. That's why I started by saying if an investor uses the CAPM, to be more specific, a shareholder, he or she will calculate the required return. So what return should this specific investor earn to be compensated in a fair, in an adequate way for the firm-specific risk? What does this logic here mean? It says Rj equals Rf. Rf is, of course, the risk-free interest rate. This bracketed term is Rm minus Rf. What is that? Rm is the return on the market portfolio. So that's typically an index. That could be the NASDAQ. That could be the S&P 500. So it would be basically a pool of stocks of which the one stock I'm analyzing is a part of. So what does this tell me? The return that I as a shareholder should earn on a specific investment in a specific firm equals the risk-free rate. This here compensates me for the time value of money. As you see, it's the risk-free rate, so I don't get any compensation for risk. However, if you invest in any firm, like in my firm, company J, you are not just happy being compensated for time, you also want to be compensated for the risk. So part of the required return must be the risk component, the compensation you as an investor want to earn on the risk that you're accepting. So how does that work? The return on the market portfolio. The market portfolio, like I said, is a basket of similar stocks. So this return here of the market portfolio includes compensation for the time value of money and for the risk of this basket of stocks. So if I, in the bracketed term, say return on the market minus risk-free rate, what I'm logically really doing is, this is key, pay attention, return on the market consists of compensation for time value and risk, and I deduct RF, the risk-free interest rate, which is only compensation for time. So if I have compensation for time and risk minus the compensation only for the time value, what is the result of only this whole bracketed term then? Tell me. Tell me. Say again?
The interest rate of the market, like the return?
Risk.
The risk.
Yes, very good, guys. If I, in the bracketed term, have the compensation for time value and risk, minus the compensation only for time value, the result of the bracketed term then only gives me the compensation for the risk component. We're almost there.
I have a question.
Yeah?
Can you give an example of a risk-free rate? Would that be of a...
The risk-free rate in the real world, so it does not exist because in the real world no investment is risk-free. In the real world, it is approximated by using the interest rate on a short-term American T-bill, so on a short-term American bond. Yeah.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
No problem. We're almost there. So what is the return that you as an investor want to earn on your investment in the stocks of company J? You want to be compensated for time. You also want to be compensated for risk, but for how much risk? That is different for every company because every company has a different firm risk. So what is our way of measuring firm risk? And that is now beta. As you see, I don't just call it beta, I call it beta J. It's the same J as here. So this should tell you that beta is also firm specific. So what this here means is it's the specific risk of company J. If you were to do the CAPM for Apple, it would say required return of Apple equals the risk-free rate plus the Apple-specific beta multiplied with return on the market portfolio minus risk-free rate. So beta is a firm-specific metric. And beta tells us something about the risk of a firm. In case you're wondering what does beta tell us, rewatch please the refresher finance from last week. In a nutshell, in 1 or 2 sentences, beta tells us how in sync or not in sync the specific stock, in my example, the stock of company J, is moving with the market portfolio. So if a stock has a beta of exactly 1, it means the market moves like this. This is a timeline. This is a stock price. If a company has a beta of 1, it means it makes exactly the movements of the market. If the beta of a company is, let's say, less than 1, 0.5, it means it moves in the same direction as the market, but less intense. So that would look something like this then. It's less volatile. A beta could theoretically be negative, let's say -1. Then it means the stock moves against the market. If the market is going up, what is my stock doing? It's going down. If the stock is going down, if the market is going down, a stock with a beta of -1 would be going up. And last but not least, the beta can be well above 1. Theoretically, no limit. Let's say beta is 2. What does that mean? If the market goes up, my specific stock goes up even more. If the market goes down, my specific stock goes down even more. So long story short, the higher beta, the more risky a stock is. One important piece of information here, beta is a relative risk metric. It's relative. That means I'm not making an absolute statement, it's very risky or not risky. I'm comparing it to the risk of the overall market. So if a company has a beta of exactly 1, I'm not saying it's risk-free or anything like this. I would say it is as risky as the market. If the beta of a company is more than 1, let's say 2, I would say it is more risky than the market. And if beta is less than 1, I would say this specific stock is less risky than the market. Does this make sense, guys?
Question.
Ask.
What would be like an example of an asset with a negative beta?
Gold. You clearly have not watched the finance refresher from last week. Watch it. It's gold.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I'm confused because RJ is how much shareholders want to receive in return.
Yes.
And understanding usually that's dividends, but dividends is the company who determines how much they pay. Sometimes company can choose not to pay any dividends.
Sure.
And so what good is it for us to calculate how much investors want to receive if at the end of the day it's the company who choose that?
Thanks, Oliver. It's a good question. I don't want to answer it because that's what's going to keep us busy for 4 weeks. But to say something and not just let's talk later, I want to briefly address it. It is not correct to say what an investor, the shareholder, earns, what's in it for him or her, the shareholder, is the dividends only. So we have a separate chapter on our agenda in I think 2 or 3 weeks, dividend policy. We will look at that. We need to analyze this some more. Okay? So for the time being, I'm happy if you can keep up. Don't worry about it. Don't even think about it. In 2 weeks, when we discuss, I think it's in 2 weeks, we'll discuss dividend policy some more. Okay?
I have a question as well.
Ask.
Yeah, you just said the higher the beta, the higher the volatility. But isn't it the more away from zero, the higher the volatility? Because if it's -2, the volatility is really
Very cool. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sophie. I was not as accurate as clearly you are. You're right. I should probably not say the higher the beta, the more volatile. Because if beta is negative, it is also volatile. So a beta of -10 would mean if the market goes up by 1, my specific stock will go down by 10. So it's moving against the market, but it is still super volatile. You're absolutely right. Yeah, agree 100%. Good job. Yeah. Let me wrap it up. So this is a key point that a lot of people get confused about. So beta tells us how risky a specific stock is relative to the market. So what is the whole CAPM about? It tells us if we as shareholders apply it, the required return that we should earn on company J, depending on the risk-free interest rate. This whole bracketed term, by the way, the whole bracketed term together, based on what it is referred to as the risk premium. So what is the CAPM about? It tells us our required return should be equal to, or is depending on, the compensation for the time, the compensation for the risk, multiplied with however much or little risk a specific firm has. So if you as an investor calculate the required return on Apple, let's say, I'm just making stuff up now. Let's say you do this and you calculate according to CAPM, the return on Apple equals, it's completely made up, 10%. Then you look at the real world and you see the realized return of Apple, or the expected, maybe I should say, the expected return of Apple is 9%. What does this tell you? According to CAPM, required return is 10%. Then you look at the expected return that you expect to earn on Apple, and you find it's 9%. I see from Pepijn online, bad investment, different opinions. Different opinions, guys. Should I buy this, yes or no?
Does it mean that you earn more than the whole stock?
Well, I asked the question. My question is it something I should buy or not?
Yes.
Are you asking me or telling me?
I'm telling yes, because you'll earn more than the stock itself. If you invest in, for example, the S500, or you invest into, for example, okay, like if you invest, for example, in the Berkshire, and it's 10%, you'll earn more than just investing into S500.
Yeah, that's what I want to keep all the complexity away so that we can focus on the core mechanic. The core mechanic is this. CAPM tells us how much we should be earning given a specific level of firm risk. CAPM says, I should earn 10%. I look at the real stock price development of Apple and I see, based on the real stock price development, I can expect to earn 9%. So based on this level of risk, a fair compensation would be 10%. In the real world, I find, if I buy this stock, I can expect to only earn 9%. Is this a good or a bad investment?
Someone in the chat says you didn't get compensated for the risk enough.
Exactly. Who said that?
Robert.
Robert. You're absolutely right, Robert. I can only reiterate that. If these are the actual numbers, this would not be a good investment at all. And the reason is simple. Based on this given level of risk, I should earn 10%, but in the real world I find I can only earn 9%. So clearly I'm not compensated fairly for the risk. If, however, let's say I calculate according to CAPM, the required return is 10%. I look at the real world and I calculate an expected return for Apple of 11%. What about that? Should I buy this, yes or no?
Yes, you need to buy because the company shares are undervalued. The company is undervalued basically. You will earn more than...
Yes. I agree with everything you said. I just would not say you should buy it or you must buy it or anything. I would say theoretically it's a good investment because based on the firm-specific risk, a fair compensation would be 10%, but I can actually earn slightly even more than that, which would make it indeed, like you said correctly, an undervalued stock. What would happen? Most people would buy it, driving up the stock price, and as they do this, the expected return will decrease until expected return and CAPM return are more or less equal. So the market forces would make sure that it's aligned again. All right. I want to bring now everything together. This is the last thing I want to do today. I want to do this now in a very neat, systematic way. So, we are trying to answer, basically in finance, one question and one question only. What can we do to maximize firm value? At the beginning I said, this breaks actually down into two different questions. Which assets should I buy? And how should I finance these assets? Just in order to answer the first question, which assets should I buy, I would have to engage in a net present value calculation. So the net present value of my project equals minus cash flow at T0 plus cash flow at T1 divided by 1 plus a discount rate to the power of 1 plus cash flow 2 discounted by 2 periods plus cash flow at year n divided by 1 plus discount rate to the power of n. I cannot immediately solve this because I need to figure out the discount rate first. The discount rate must be some sort of composite of the cost of debt and the cost of equity. So just in order to deal with the cost of equity, I would use the CAPM and calculate the required return on equity. I'll show you in a second what I mean. RF plus beta of firm J multiplied with RM minus RF. Again, please don't forget, the bracketed term here is called risk premium. Okay? So this would be the logic. We are not fully done yet. I made a very big deal about one thing before, that the CAPM can be used to calculate two different things. And this is it. This is the last important piece of information for today. We pick it up exactly here on Thursday, and it's this. It's super easy to get confused what the CAPM can do, because it can do two things. If an investor uses it, if an investor uses CAPM, he or she will calculate the required return. This is then what the CAPM output will give us, right? It's this here. And now, the important thing, and I need you to wrap your head around this, is the same calculation from the perspective of the company gives you something completely different. If I am this company, I am now company J, I would do exactly the same calculation that you engage in as my shareholders, but I'm not calculating a required return. So if the firm is using the CAPM, can somebody tell me what is it that they are calculating then?
Consider return.
What?
Dividend return.
No.
Beta.
Cost of capital, done. Super nice. Dan in the chat said it completely correctly. Dan said cost of capital. I want to be a little bit more specific. Cost of equity. Why? if you are a shareholder and you say, hey dude, you say this to me, hey dude, if I invest in your company, this is the return I want to earn, whatever, 5%. Then logically, from my perspective I'm the firm, what you want to earn is of course my cost. I explained this, I think, yesterday night or 2 nights ago on WhatsApp to a student, and I said, I need to tell this all students. I give you a good example. You are a bank, and I'm some normal guy, and I come to your bank, and I want to borrow 100 euro from you at an interest rate of 2%. Every year, I will give you 2 euro. You will calculate it as 100 multiplied with 2% equals 2 euro, and you will call this, because you're the bank, interest income. I, as the person having borrowed money from you, use the same calculation, 100 euro multiplied with 2% equals 2 euro. Same calculation, but I call it interest expense. Nobody is confused about that either, all right? So, long story short, I said this is the last thing, and I mean it. Wrap your head around the fact that an investor, a potential shareholder, will use the CAPM to calculate the return that he or she should be earning on the investment in the stocks of company J based on the given risk of company J. The company itself will use the same calculation, identical numbers. They will not calculate a required return, but what they calculate is a cost of equity.
So there's a question.
Ask.
So the RE,
yeah.
In the balance sheet, is that the result of the CAPM?
What? Say again.
The RE?
Yeah. Wait a second, come out. Do you mean the RE as in when I say here RJ or here
that
R
one.
this
Yes.
here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Is in the balance sheet, is that the result of the CAPM?
Yeah, who asks?
CC.
CC. Okay, CC. Yeah, that's exactly it. So, and please, but CC, don't say it like this, all right? Don't say the RE in the balance sheet. That's not in the balance sheet. I have a balance sheet here, and I use the balance sheet information to calculate the cost of equity. The cost of equity does not show up in the balance sheet, of course. But you're right. The company would use all of these of this data, fill it into the CAPM, calculate RJ. So if I'm Apple, I will calculate R Apple, which is then, from the perspective of Apple, the cost of Apple's equity. That would indeed be the number that we were looking for here. Yeah, this here. Yes. Guys, does everyone understand? So this is for me the key point. I want that you understand that beta is a firm-specific metric that we use to measure risk, but not in an absolute way. Yeah, I see in the chat the question, so RE equals RJ. Rick, I'm not a super big fan of phrasing it like this, but I suppose you could say it. The index J here, J, is just a variable, a placeholder for a company name. I have it on my slides like this. So in order to be consistent with my slides, I keep it like this. If you simply write RE, like I did here, it's more general. It's the cost of equity of any kind of company. If you calculate the cost of equity for a specific firm, you would probably then call it something like RE and whatever, Apple or you know, whatever it is. I want that you understand that beta is a firm-specific metric of risk, but not absolute, relative. So I'm measuring the risk of one specific firm relative to the market. Is it more risky than the market, as risky as, or less risky than the market? I fill this into the CAPM, and together with the risk-free interest rate and the risk premium, I can then determine what the return on a specific stock should be based on this level of risk. If a shareholder engages in this calculation, he or she will be calculating what we call a required return. Why is it called required return? Required in order for you as an investor to be willing to accept this level of risk. That's what the word required means. If the same calculation is used by the firm itself, same numbers, everything the same, they would not say we are calculating a required return. They would say we are calculating a cost of equity. If you say this is a bit confusing, think about my banking example. The same money that you pay your bank for your mortgage, the bank will call. So this is, let's say, your bank. Your bank will call interest income. And the same money, you, as a borrower of the bank, you will call interest expenses. The calculation that the bank engaged in to calculate their interest income will be identical to your calculation in which you calculate interest expenses, but you will call it by different names because you think about the same stream of cash differently. You think, oh shit, I have to pay this again, and the bank says, ha, I'm getting interest income again. But it's the same stream of cash, and the same logic holds here. We can use the CAPM for two different things. An investor uses it to calculate a required return, and the same return, it's of course an interest rate that we calculate here, a return rate, if you will. If the firm calculates it, they will call it cost of equity.
So then Juliet asks, is the calculated cost of capital the final discount range you use in the NPV calculation?
Okay, cool question. What's the question? Is the cost of equity?
She says capital.
Yeah, okay. So who asked? Juliet?
Yeah, Juliet.
I think it's a cool question, Juliet. We are not quite there yet. What I'm willing to say is the cost of equity that we have here, that we have calculated here, is not the discount rate that we use in the CAPM, in the net present value calculation. What we have calculated here, this here, is only the cost of equity, which we will then need, okay? So this will be our starting point on Thursday. Bringing all of this together, this takes about, I don't know, 10 minutes, something like that. Louis, wait, I see a question in the chat. What does VF mean again? I'm not really sure because I did not write VF anywhere. Did I?
No.
I don't get it.
RF, risk-free.
Where? This here?
No, the risk-free, I think.
Okay, yeah, RF is always the risk-free interest rate. So the interest rate that you earn on an investment that has no risk whatsoever, logically, therefore, it is a compensation only for the time value of money. It looks like a V. Well, Luis, I will make a note, and when I read your exam answers, I will scrutinize your handwriting too. Haha. Guys, any other questions before we stop?
Could you, I don't know if it's relevant enough, but could you one time maybe show us sort of the methodology you can use in order to calculate the beta? Because I know it's relative, but...
Yes. Yeah, you posted a comment, Deborah. Yes, of course. I have it on the slides. It's my next slide. I can show you. You have access to this the moment I upload. Let me show you quickly. Can we show the slides briefly? Perfect. So just look at the formula. So you calculate beta of J. Again, J is here a placeholder for the firm name. Apple, Microsoft, Netflix, something. How you have to read this calculation is, it looks messy because of the mathematical notation. It's not complicated. It is the covariance between RJ and the expected return on the market divided by sigma squared is, of course, the variance, or you can say the standard deviation squared, of the returns on the market. This is just the mathematical notation of writing it. The covariance is essentially an unstandardized correlation coefficient. So the term on top has to be read as the covariance between Rj and Rm. Okay? So that tells us how in sync or not in sync the returns of company J and the markets move. And we divide it by the variance, so the fluctuations of the market portfolio itself. This is how you do it. It's not complicated actually to do. You can do this in Excel very easily. This is really the last thing, okay? We are massively over time already. When you calculate beta in the real world, there's something that's very important. So the math is super straightforward. Excel has a covariance formula, so there's no problem. The problem is the intellectual underpinning of it. Because when I say I'm tracking the volatility of the market portfolio, as I'm doing here in the denominator, right? Sigma squared of ERM is the variance of the returns of the market portfolio. That clearly means it's not one measurement. I'm looking at that over the course of time. But then the question is, over which period should I calculate beta? For the last month? For a year? For 2 years? For 5 years? If you Google this, you will find no definitive answer. And it can also not be definitively answered. Imagine I would calculate, for example, beta for Apple. And I want to do a very good job. I want to be very thorough. So I include all the data, all the stock price data, since Apple even exists. But then I'm implying that the current risk still has anything to do with the stock price that Apple had in the late 80s. That was a completely different company compared to now. So clearly I should then use newer data only. But how new? Or think about Netflix. The best thing that ever happened to Netflix was what? Tell me. What was the best thing ever happening to Netflix? Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right, Remco. Because all of us are now at home watching TV all fucking day long. What happens? Everyone who does not have a subscription yet purchased it. Have a look at the stock price of Netflix January, February, March, April. I mean, Netflix is praying that there will be no vaccine. I mean, probably not, but I mean, just financially it makes sense. So if I were to calculate the beta of Netflix, I think I could make a relatively convincing argument to say we should only use data, include data from February on. Because we are now post-corona, and pre-corona was a very different environment. So long story short, there is no magic number. You will find it's very common to use 3 years or 5 years. All kinds of different rules of thumb exist. There is no hard way to determine this. I always would say, try to figure out since when the company is in this shape it is in now, meaning since when it has the risk that it currently has.
Another question.
Last question.
Yes. What if the equity is not built from profits besides money from shareholders?
Yeah.
Isn't then the cost of equity not accurate anymore for the entire block?
No. So I understand the question. The question was if all the equity is not only profits from the past, but also, I'm assuming, then common stock, does the calculation change in any way? The answer is not at all. There's no reason why it would be any different. Super, guys. I mean, thank you very much for now. I'm happy that you ask your questions and that you are zero shy. That's exactly how I like it. I think we all have to make an effort to not always go over time, even though I don't honestly mind it. But I have doubled the lectures as compared to corporate finance before I took it over. So what I can promise you, I cannot promise that I will in each lecture answer all questions. But what I can, and on the record promise now, I will, over the course, we have enough time to really address everything, all right? So that I can promise. Guys, thank you very much for attending, for making it lively, and for making me enjoy teaching again. I was very concerned. I thought it's going to be boring and I will never meet my students. It's amazing. We just need to find a way how we can grab beers together, and all my problems are solved. A last thing that has nothing to do with the course. I only want to do this now because I have the platform. Many of my students say the same thing I say. I'm lonely, I'm isolated, I don't get to see anyone. Nobody wants to drink beers with me anymore. So I got together with SR, to be more specific with the event teams of SR. And we've cooked up a relatively elaborate, kind of awesome, I think, pub quiz. SR has posted it on Instagram, on Facebook. It's this Thursday at 6 o'clock. We have a huge WhatsApp group. So we are in the final steps of preparing questions. It's all kinds of movie stuff, series stuff, music. I have created around only crazy Trump shit. And we will get here in the studio, get a bit cozy. I will definitely bring an ungodly amount of beer. If you want, just go to Instagram, sign up for the WhatsApp group, and yeah, let's do something nice on Thursday night. Guys, thank you very much for your attention. I see you on Thursday, 1 o'clock again, all right? Have a good day.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you. Thank you.